Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, and yet something still won't open? Like your life is moving but not flowing? Like you're trying hard, you're praying, you're visualizing, you're taking action. But deep down, there's this quiet fear whispering, what if I'm late? What if I missed it? What if I'm not meant for more? If that's where you are right now, I want you to breathe for a moment and hear this clearly. Sometimes the feeling of delay is not a punishment. Sometimes it's the final preparation. Sometimes what feels like stagnation is actually the exact doorway that appears right before a new level of abundance becomes real, because the universe doesn't always announce the breakthrough with fireworks. Most of the time it announces it with pressure, with silence, with uncertainty, with that strange season where old patterns feel too small, but the new reality hasn't fully arrived yet. And this is where most people sabotage everything, right at the edge. Not because they're weak, not because they don't deserve it, but because they don't recognize the spiritual timing, the energetic timing, and the emotional timing of transformation. So in this video, we're going to talk about what I call the quantum portal of abundance, that moment in life where your reality is about to shift, and your only job is to stay aligned long enough to receive what's already moving toward you. And before we go deeper, do me a quick favor. Like this video, subscribe and comment below the words, "I'm ready to receive." Your engagement helps this message reach the people who are silently losing faith, right before their turnaround arrives. Now let's begin, because if you're going through this, the shift is closer than you think. There is a very specific kind of season that almost nobody talks about with honesty, because it doesn't look spiritual on the outside. It looks messy. It looks like delay. It looks like disappointment you can't fully explain. You wake up, and your body already feels tired, not because you didn't sleep, but because hope has been carrying too much weight for too long. And even though you keep going, even though you're trying to stay faithful, there's a quiet question you don't always say out loud. If the universe really has my back, why does it feel like nothing is moving? That question isn't weakness. It's not negativity. It's the human soul trying to understand the silence between prayers and answers. And what I want you to realize is this, that silence is often not empty. It's often active. It's often the exact space where something bigger is rearranging itself behind the scenes. The reason it feels uncomfortable is because you're standing in between versions of your life. The old reality doesn't fit anymore, and the new one hasn't fully formed yet. You're not fully who you used to be, but you haven't become who you're meant to be. That in-between space is what I call the quantum portal of abundance, because it's not just a moment, it's a transition of identity. And identity is not something you change with words alone. Identity changes when your nervous system learns a new truth. That's why this part of the journey feels like pressure, not because you're being punished, but because your system is being stretched. It's like the universe is asking, can you hold the next level without collapsing back into the old one? And this is where people misunderstand manifestation. They assume manifestation is a technique to control external events. But manifestation is deeper than that. Real manifestation is becoming internally compatible with what you want to receive. Abundance is not just money. It is capacity. It is stability. It is emotional room inside you. It is the ability to be given more without self-destructing. Think about it for a moment. If abundance arrived tomorrow in full force, would your inner world be ready to hold it? Or would it trigger fear, pressure, guilt, and the need to prove yourself? Because for many people, that's exactly what happens. They ask for abundance, but what they truly crave is relief. And relief and abundance are not the same frequency. Relief wants everything to happen instantly, so the pain stops. Abundance moves with timing, maturity, and alignment. Relief says, I need it now. Abundance says, I can hold it when it arrives. That's a powerful difference, and it changes everything. This is why your current struggle might not be random at all. It might be the final stage before a breakthrough. The universe often creates a turning point by first taking away your ability to rely on the old patterns. Old strategies stop working. Old relationships feel heavy. Old jobs feel like cages. Even your old self-talk becomes unbearable, because you can't lie to yourself the way you used to. It's almost as if your spirit is being backed into a corner where the only way out is growth. And that feels like pressure, because growth requires surrender. Not surrender as giving up, but surrender as releasing the desperate need to force life into your timeline. And yes, timing matters. Timing is one of the most spiritual concepts people ignore. You can be talented, hardworking, and determined, and still miss timing. Not because you weren't worthy, but because you were emotionally out of sync. Timing is not just about what happens around you. It's about what happens within you. Your external world responds to the inner signal you repeat daily, not the affirmation you say once when you feel inspired. This is why people stay stuck for years. They speak abundance, but live in survival. They dream big, but make small, fearful choices. They want miracles, but keep feeding habits that keep them heavy. Now, I want to say something that may feel uncomfortable at first, but it can also liberate you. Sometimes the reason abundance hasn't landed yet is because the universe is waiting for you to stop negotiating with your old identity. The universe doesn't punish you. It educates you. It brings you back to yourself again and again until you become stable enough to live the life you asked for. Because abundance requires structure. It requires boundaries. It requires discernment. It requires the ability to say no. And most importantly, it requires the emotional strength to remain calm when your life starts changing for real. When the turnaround is close, life often starts shaking the places you thought were solid. You may notice increased tension at home, confusion about your future, sudden fatigue, and deep emotional waves that seem to appear out of nowhere. And it's tempting to interpret that as a bad sign. But many times this is simply the old energy leaving your system. You are detoxing from an identity built on struggle. You are being separated from the version of you that only knew how to survive. And survival is loud. It complains. It panics. It needs proof. But abundance is quiet. It builds. It waits. It prepares. It strengthens. So if you feel like you're in a strange season where you can't go back but you can't see forward clearly, you're not cursed. You're not failing. You may be crossing the bridge. And bridges don't feel comfortable. Bridges require trust. Bridges require movement without full certainty. Bridges require you to hold your faith without demanding constant evidence. I want you to hold one truth close to your heart. The portal is not meant to break you. It is meant to reveal you. It is revealing the parts of you that still live in fear. And it is inviting you to build a new internal foundation that matches the abundance you desire. Because the turnaround you're waiting for is not only an external shift, it is an internal arrival. The universe responds when you become the person who can finally receive and keep what you have been calling in. There's a moment in every transformation that feels almost cruel, not because life is against you, but because life is honest. It's the moment when your old self starts falling apart before your new self feels real. You can still function, you can still show up, you can still smile in conversations, but inside something is shifting so deeply that you don't even have the right language for it. And that's when people start wondering if they're losing their way, when in reality, they may be getting closer to their true path than ever before. The quantum portal doesn't open when everything feels safe. It opens when your soul is ready to stop pretending. This is why the signs before abundance are not always comfortable signs. Sometimes the first sign is emotional fatigue, the kind you can't cure with sleep. Sometimes it's a sudden intolerance for chaos, for drama, for meaningless distractions. Sometimes it's a deep craving for simplicity, for silence, for truth. And sometimes it is the strange feeling of being tested, as if life is watching how you respond when nothing is guaranteed. That testing is not a spiritual game. It is refinement. It is the universe helping you strengthen what will need to carry abundance later. Because if you can't hold yourself steady in the unknown, you won't be steady in the overflow either. You see, abundance is not just something you receive. Abundance is something that reveals your relationship with power. And power makes people uncomfortable, especially those who grew up believing they had to struggle to deserve love, attention, or safety. For many adults, scarcity isn't only about money. Scarcity is an inner posture. It's a nervous system that expects disappointment. It's a heart that braces for betrayal. It's a mind that keeps scanning the horizon for the next loss. So when abundance begins to approach, the body often reacts as if danger is coming. Not because abundance is dangerous, but because change is unfamiliar. And what is unfamiliar can feel like threat. This is where many people lose timing without realizing it. They sense the shift coming, and instead of opening, they tighten. They start obsessing. They start calculating every detail. They start asking for signs, then asking again, then again, until the spiritual journey becomes a constant negotiation with the universe. And the problem with negotiation is that it keeps you emotionally unstable. One day you feel certain, the next day you feel defeated. One day you believe, the next day you collapse into doubt. And in that emotional instability, you send a very mixed signal into life. You're saying, I want abundance, but you're also saying, I don't trust it. I don't trust myself, I don't trust the timing. That conflict creates delay, not as punishment but as protection, because there is a hidden mercy in divine timing. Sometimes the universe delays the reward because it's giving you time to become safe with what you desire. Think about it. If abundance arrived before you had healed your fear of losing, you would hold it with anxiety, and anxiety always leaks. If prosperity came before you stopped seeking validation, you would use money to prove something, and proving always exhausts. If opportunities exploded before you learned boundaries, you would say yes to everything, and yes without boundaries becomes burnout. So abundance waits until you can receive it without turning it into a new form of suffering. And that's what makes this portal so sacred. It's not only about what you're attracting, it's about what you're becoming. It's about the shift from chasing to allowing, from forcing to aligning, from pleading to embodying. The portal is the moment where your spirit is learning that abundance isn't something you beg for, it's something you match, it's something you become compatible with. And compatibility is built through emotional coherence, through consistent inner discipline, through the kind of quiet strength most people underestimate. There's a spiritual reason the turnaround often arrives after you feel like you can't do it anymore. That moment of I can't is not failure. It's the collapse of the illusion that you were in control. It's the point where you stop believing you can force life into submission. And when the illusion collapses, something else is born. Surrender that isn't weak. Surrender that is clear. The kind of surrender that says, I am done fighting the universe. I'm ready to flow. And flow is not passive. Flow is a state of cooperation. It is co-creation. It is taking aligned action while trusting the unseen. This is why people who awaken spiritually start feeling discomfort in places they used to tolerate. The job that once felt stable now feels suffocating. The relationship that once felt familiar now feels heavy. The habits that once numbed you now feel empty. You begin to notice that some of the things you thought were normal were actually draining you. And that awareness can feel lonely at first, because you're not the same person anymore, but you're not fully surrounded by your new world yet. That loneliness is another sign of the portal. It's a sign that you're leaving old frequencies behind. And in this space, something very subtle begins to happen. Your intuition gets louder, not louder as panic, but louder as knowing. You start feeling what's true before it becomes obvious. You start sensing when something isn't aligned, even if it looks good on paper. You start noticing patterns, synchronicities, repeated messages that come through in ordinary moments. A phrase someone says, a book that appears in your path, a conversation that confirms what you've been feeling. These aren't coincidences meant to entertain you. They are spiritual confirmations that you're being guided, even when you can't see the full map. But here's the emotional challenge. Guidance rarely feels like certainty. It feels like invitation. It feels like the universe whispering, not shouting. And if you're addicted to certainty, you miss the whisper. If you need guarantees before you move, you will always remain in the old reality. Because guarantees belong to the past. The future is always unknown. The portal is where you learn to move with faith, not fantasy. Faith is calm commitment to what you sense, even when you don't have proof yet. This is why abundance often comes through small openings first. A minor opportunity, a simple invitation, a new idea that keeps returning, a moment of unexpected peace. These are not insignificant. They are your new life testing the door. They are your next level seeing if you will meet it with maturity. And maturity is not excitement. Maturity is steadiness. It is your ability to recognize the opening without turning it into pressure. Because pressure is what makes people miss timing. Pressure makes you rush. Pressure makes you obsess. Pressure makes you cling to outcomes. And clinging is heavy energy. Clinging tells the universe, I don't trust this. When you don't trust, you interfere. When you interfere, you distort. And that distortion can turn a divine opening into a chaotic experience. That's why people sometimes receive what they asked for and still lose it. Not because they were unworthy, but because they weren't stable enough internally to hold the new reality. If you're in this season right now, where you feel like the ground is shifting under your feet, understand what this really is. It's not the end, it's the recalibration. It's the point where the universe is making you emotionally ready. The portal is shaping you into someone who can live abundance without fear, without guilt, without self-sabotage. And that is a form of blessing most people don't recognize until later. So when you feel uncertain, when you feel like you're being stretched, when you feel like something is about to change but you don't know what, don't rush to label it as bad. This might be the sacred pause before the breakthrough, the quiet tension before the release, the last stretch before the finish line. And the reason it feels so intense is because your old identity is still trying to hold on, but your future is already pulling you forward. Sometimes the most confusing part of this journey is not the lack of money, not the lack of opportunity, not even the lack of results. It's the inner contradiction you start feeling when something is about to change. On the surface, your life might look normal. You still wake up, handle responsibilities, respond to messages, push through the days, but inside you feel like you're living in two worlds at once. One part of you is deeply tired of the same patterns, the same survival mode, the same emotional weight. Another part of you is terrified of what it means to finally step out of it. That contradiction can feel like anxiety, like restlessness, like impatience, like a pressure in your chest that has no clear story attached to it. And if you don't understand what it is, you might label it as failure when it's actually the most important sign of all. Your identity is shifting. Abundance does not enter a life that is emotionally closed. Not because the universe is cruel, but because abundance is expansive energy, and expansion requires space. If your nervous system is tight, if your mind is constantly bracing, if your heart is guarded, then even blessings can feel like threats. This is why people sometimes get what they asked for and still feel anxious. They get the relationship and become fearful. They get the money and become paranoid. They get the opportunity and suddenly feel unworthy. The external gift arrives, but the internal capacity isn't ready, and the mismatch creates stress. That stress then gets interpreted as, "This isn't working," or "This isn't for me," or "I knew it was too good to be true." In reality, the blessing is real. The timing is real. But the system inside you needs to learn how to hold it without collapsing into old programming. That's why this portal often begins with discomfort. You may feel like life is asking more from you emotionally. You may feel more sensitive than usual, more aware of what drains you, less tolerant of what used to feel normal. It becomes harder to pretend. It becomes harder to numb out. Things you once avoided start rising to the surface. Unresolved grief, old disappointments, childhood memories, the pain of feeling unseen, the fear of being too much, the shame of feeling behind in life. All of it starts appearing like waves. And that can be terrifying if you don't understand it, because it feels like you're getting worse. But very often you're not getting worse. You're getting honest. And honesty is the doorway to transformation. There is a sacred intelligence in the way the universe prepares you for abundance. It rarely gives you what you want without first purifying what would sabotage it. And purification is not pretty. Purification is emotional detox. It's the moment when your soul says, "I can't keep carrying this." And the body responds by releasing tears that come out of nowhere, random exhaustion, sudden mood swings, the desire to be alone, the desire to sit in silence. That's not weakness, that's recalibration. It's your system finally realizing that the old version of you is too heavy for the life you're calling in. Many people talk about manifestation like it's a quick shortcut, like it's a secret code to the universe. But what they don't talk about enough is the spiritual maturity required to manifest and sustain abundance without creating chaos. Because abundance is not only attraction, it is also responsibility. It requires boundaries. It requires integrity. It requires emotional stability. It requires discernment. If those qualities are not present, abundance becomes overwhelming, and the mind will try to run back to what's familiar. This is why the portal is so intense. It doesn't just test your faith, it tests your readiness. And readiness is not about being perfect. Readiness is about becoming coherent. Coherence means your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions are no longer fighting each other. Coherence is when your inner world becomes stable enough to support a new external world. And if you've been living in survival mode for years, coherence will feel unfamiliar at first. Calm might even feel dangerous, because your body is addicted to urgency. You might notice that when things get quiet, your mind tries to create problems. When there's peace, it searches for what could go wrong. When there's stillness, it starts replaying old fears. That's not because you're broken. It's because your nervous system learned to equate stress with safety. Stress felt like control. Stress felt like preparedness. Stress felt like being alert enough to avoid pain. But abundance does not live inside constant stress. Abundance lives inside grounded presence. This is where the quantum part of the portal becomes real in a practical way. The quantum field, in this sense, is not a mystical concept floating somewhere outside you. It is the invisible layer of life that responds to your internal signal. And your internal signal is not your words. It is your repeated emotional state. It is your dominant identity. It is what you consistently embody when nobody is watching. That is the frequency you broadcast into life, and life reflects it back. Not because it is judging you, but because it is matching you. So the portal is the moment where you start becoming aware of what you've been broadcasting unconsciously. Not through guilt, but through clarity. You start seeing patterns. You start recognizing how you react under pressure. You start noticing the way you sabotage yourself when things begin improving. You start witnessing the habit of expecting disappointment. You start noticing how quickly you assume things won't work out, even before you try. And the awareness alone is powerful, because awareness breaks unconscious repetition. Awareness is the moment where a pattern can finally end. And there's another sign that often appears right before abundance shifts. Life brings you face to face with your relationship to trust. Trust is not passive. Trust is not pretending everything is fine. Trust is the deep decision to stay aligned even when things are unclear. Trust is the refusal to panic when you don't see immediate evidence. Trust is the willingness to remain emotionally steady when the external world has not yet confirmed the internal change. This is why timing matters so much, because timing is not about the calendar, it's about alignment. There are moments where the universe opens a window, not just for opportunities, but for internal change. And if you miss that internal change, you may delay the external one. Not because you weren't meant for it, but because you slipped back into the old identity. The old identity doesn't lose timing because it's lazy. It loses timing because it's reactive. It moves from fear. It demands certainty. It seeks quick relief, and quick relief often destroys long-term abundance. The portal invites you into a new kind of power. Not the power of forcing, but the power of holding. Holding your energy, holding your direction, holding your faith, holding your boundaries, holding your vision without turning it into desperation. Because desperation repels what you desire. Desperation says, I don't have it. Desperation says, I can't be okay without it. And that frequency keeps you in the state of lack. But when abundance is truly close, there is often a deeper peace underneath the chaos. It might be small, almost unnoticeable at first. A quiet knowing. A subtle inner voice saying, something is coming. Not as fantasy, but as certainty that doesn't need proof. That certainty is not loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It simply stands. And when you touch that certainty, you begin to understand that this season is not here to harm you. It is here to mature you. It is shaping your inner world so that when abundance arrives, you don't lose it, you don't fear it, and you don't shrink away from it. Because the real miracle is not just receiving abundance. The real miracle is becoming the kind of person who can live in abundance without losing yourself. And that is what this portal is building inside you. There is a sacred kind of almost that people rarely understand. Almost getting the job, almost closing the deal, almost feeling free, almost seeing the money arrive, almost being chosen, almost being stable again, almost finally breathing. And when you live in this space for too long, it does something dangerous to the heart. It doesn't just create frustration, it creates spiritual exhaustion. You start questioning whether you're truly guided or simply hopeful. You start wondering if you've misread the signs. You start whispering to yourself late at night, the kind of thought that feels heavy to admit. Maybe I'm just not one of those people abundance happens to. But what if the almost is not rejection? What if the almost is refinement? Because abundance does not always arrive like a gift falling from the sky. Abundance often arrives like a test of emotional structure. It arrives like an invitation that asks for maturity. It arrives like a small opening that quietly checks whether you can carry more without falling into the same old collapse. And this is exactly where the quantum portal becomes so real, because it forces you to face something you've been avoiding for most of your life: the difference between wanting abundance and being able to hold abundance. There is a reason some people manifest quickly and then lose everything. There is a reason others seem to move slowly but build something that lasts. The difference is not only discipline, not only skill, not only strategy. It's internal readiness. It's the ability to receive without panic. It's the ability to expand without guilt. It's the ability to step into the next level without dragging the old emotional baggage along with it. And that baggage is subtle. It doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. Sometimes it looks like trying too hard. Sometimes it looks like needing constant confirmation. Sometimes it looks like spiritual overthinking, constantly analyzing every sign, every number, every dream, every synchronicity, until life becomes one big attempt to decode a message instead of simply living. And here is what happens in that energy. Timing gets distorted. When you're emotionally out of sync, you rush the wrong things and delay the right ones. You chase a door that was never meant for you and ignore the doorway that was quietly opening behind you. You say yes to what drains you because you're afraid to say no. You accept less because you're afraid to wait. You settle for the familiar because the unfamiliar asks for courage. And then later, you look back and realize the truth. The universe did bring opportunities, but they were not opportunities for instant outcomes. They were opportunities for identity growth. And because you were focused on the outcome, you couldn't recognize the deeper invitation. This is why missing timing is rarely about the universe. It's about the emotional decisions you make during uncertainty. A person who is still wired for survival will interpret uncertainty as danger. And once uncertainty becomes danger, the nervous system moves into control mode. Control mode doesn't create, control mode doesn't align, control mode grips, it obsesses, it forces, it tries to overpower life through mental pressure. But abundance doesn't respond to mental pressure. Abundance responds to emotional coherence. Abundance responds to the calm frequency of someone who trusts their path enough to remain stable even before results appear. That's why, right before the turnaround, many people experience something that feels like a breakdown. Not because everything is falling apart, but because their old coping mechanisms stop working. They can't numb the same way. They can't distract themselves the same way. They can't tolerate fake peace anymore. And the temptation is to interpret this as a negative omen. But spiritually, it can be one of the strongest signs that the portal is open. Because the portal is not only about receiving, it's about leaving behind the version of you that had to suffer to feel alive. This is where the energy of timing becomes incredibly important. Timing is not simply the calendar. Timing is the season your soul is in. Timing is the internal moment when you become ready to respond differently. It is the invisible moment when your frequency becomes consistent enough that life begins to match it back. And consistency is what most people overlook. They believe the breakthrough comes from one powerful visualization, one prayer, one ritual, one perfect mindset. But life doesn't respond to your best day. Life responds to your most repeated identity. That means the portal is asking one question, again and again in subtle ways. Who are you when nobody is cheering? Are you someone who collapses into doubt? Are you someone who blames timing? Are you someone who panics and grabs whatever is available? Or are you someone who can stay grounded, stay clear, stay aligned, even when things are not fully visible yet? Because this is the part of the journey where people create a silent betrayal of themselves. They begin abandoning the very energy they were cultivating. They get tired, they feel delayed, and they start doing things that don't match their vision. They start settling, they start reacting, they start watering seeds with stress instead of patience. And stress can destroy what patience would have grown. There is a quiet spiritual law at work here. What you rush, you often lose. What you build with emotional stability, you sustain. So the portal is not only the moment before abundance arrives, it is the moment where abundance checks the foundation. It checks your relationship with trust. It checks your relationship with worthiness. It checks whether you still believe you have to struggle to be chosen. It checks whether you still believe love and prosperity must be earned through pain. It checks whether you will sabotage your own blessing just to return to what feels familiar. And what makes this so intense is that you may not consciously realize you're doing it. It can look like being realistic. It can look like protecting yourself. It can look like not wanting to get your hopes up. But spiritually, this is the exact energy that closes the window. Because abundance doesn't enter a heart that is half open. Abundance requires full presence, full trust. Not blind trust, but embodied trust. The kind of trust that doesn't need constant reassurance. The kind of trust that says, even if I can't see it yet, I know what I'm becoming. When you're close to a turnaround, the universe often places you in situations where you must choose between short-term comfort and long-term alignment. That choice can look small. It can look like whether you stay up late scrolling to numb your mind or you go to bed early to protect your energy. It can look like whether you accept a draining opportunity out of fear or wait for an aligned one with patience. It can look like whether you speak up for yourself or remain silent to avoid conflict. Small decisions, but they echo loudly in the energetic field. They tell the universe what kind of identity is leading your life. And identity always determines timing, because abundance is not a one-time event. Abundance is an environment. It's a life you live. It's the way you treat yourself when you feel scared. It's the way you speak to yourself when you make mistakes. It's the way you hold your standards when life tempts you to lower them. That is the internal structure that abundance requires. This is why the portal can feel like spiritual pressure. It's because the old self is still begging for relief, while the new self is being asked to stand in maturity. The old self says, I need proof. The new self says, I am proof. The old self says, I can't wait anymore. The new self says, I don't rush what is meant to last. The old self says, what if it doesn't happen? The new self says, I will keep aligning until it does. And when you start living from that new self, something shifts in the field around you. Not instantly like magic, but inevitably like seasons. Opportunities begin to appear with less struggle. People begin to respond differently to your presence. The right conversations happen at the right time. Ideas arrive in your mind like downloads, quiet but clear. You stop fighting life and you start cooperating with it. And that cooperation is where timing becomes undeniable. So if you are in an almost season right now, where things feel close but not complete, don't mistake that for failure. That closeness might be the portal itself. It might be the space where abundance is shaping you so that when it arrives, you don't miss it, you don't waste it, and you don't run from it. There is a moment in every life when the universe doesn't take something away to punish you, but to free you. A moment when it removes the comfort of your old identity so you can finally step into the version of yourself that has been waiting quietly beneath fear, beneath doubt, beneath delay. And if you have been feeling stretched lately, emotionally tired, spiritually sensitive, or strangely restless, it may not be because you are falling behind. It may be because you are standing at the edge of your next reality, and life is asking you a sacred question without using words. Will you return to what feels familiar, or will you remain faithful to what feels true? The quantum portal of abundance is not a mystical fantasy, and it isn't something reserved for special people. It is a real internal passage that happens when your old patterns can no longer carry your future. It is the season where patience becomes power, where silence becomes instruction, and where the most important shift happens in the invisible. Because abundance doesn't only arrive in bank accounts, opportunities, and open doors. It arrives first as a new emotional structure, a calmer nervous system, a stronger sense of worth, a deeper relationship with trust, a steadier relationship with time. And the reason this stage feels intense is because your body is learning a new home. It is learning that peace is safe. It is learning that expansion is not danger. It is learning that receiving is not something you must beg for, but something you must be ready to hold. And maybe the most beautiful part of this journey is that the universe doesn't demand perfection from you. It simply keeps inviting you to coherence. It keeps offering you moments to choose alignment over panic, maturity over urgency, truth over coping, faith over fear. The breakthrough you want is real, but it is not only external, it is internal. It is the moment you stop living as someone who is waiting for life to change and start living as someone who has already changed inside. Because the greatest sign that abundance is close is not a number, not a miracle, not a dramatic event. The greatest sign is when you no longer abandon yourself in the waiting, when you no longer shrink in uncertainty, when you no longer negotiate your worth, When you finally become stable enough to receive what you once thought was too big for you. And if you've made it this far, something in you already knows. The turnaround isn't far. It's already moving toward you. If the universe opened the door to abundance today, would you walk through it? Or would your old fear convince you to turn back? If this message spoke directly to your soul, subscribe to the channel right now, because what we're building here is more than motivation. This is a space for transformation, alignment, and real spiritual growth. Also stay with me until the end screen, because the next video is designed to deepen this work and help you stabilize the frequency that attracts prosperity without anxiety, without self-sabotage, and without losing the timing that destiny is offering you.